Welcome, dear friends, for a tale of love, deception, and unexpected kindness. Enjoy the story. The late afternoon sun filtered through the half-drawn curtains of Jack and Emily's modest apartment. The air was thick with tension as the couple stood facing each other, their voices rising with each passing moment. "Jack, you're not listening to me!" Emily exclaimed, her perfectly manicured hands gesticulating wildly. "This is our wedding we're talking about. It's supposed to be the most important day of our lives." Jack ran a hand through his disheveled hair, his exhaustion evident in the dark circles under his eyes. I hear you, I do. But we have to be realistic. We can't afford a wedding at the plaza with a guest list of 300 people." Emily's eyes flashed with frustration. "But my cousins had their weddings there. It's a family tradition." "Your cousins aren't paying off medical school debt," Jack retorted, his voice tinged with bitterness. "I'm doing my best here, but we need to cut corners somewhere." Emily's lower lip trembled. "So what? You want us to get married at the courthouse and have a potluck reception in the park?" Jack sighed heavily. "That's not what I'm saying. I just think we need to find a middle ground. Maybe a nice restaurant reception instead of a hotel ballroom?" "A restaurant?" Emily scoffed. "God, Jack, do you even want this wedding at all?" Before Jack could respond, Emily grabbed her purse from the couch. "I can't deal with this right now. I need some air." Wait," Jack started, but the door slammed shut before he could finish. The sudden silence in the apartment was deafening. Jack slumped onto the couch, his head in his hands. The weight of his financial struggles pressed down on him like a physical force. He glanced at the framed photo of him and Emily from medical school graduation day. They looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. "Some doctor I turned out to be," he muttered to himself. "Can't even give my fiancée the wedding of her dreams." He pulled out his phone, checking his bank balance for the umpteenth time that week. The numbers stared back at him, a stark reminder of the mountain of debt he was still climbing. Jack burst out of the apartment building, his white coat flapping behind him as he sprinted down the sidewalk. The bus was just pulling up to the stop half a block away. "Wait! Hold the bus!" he shouted, waving his arm frantically. The bus driver, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, saw him coming and held the door. "Cutting it close today, Doc," she said with a wink as Jack bounded up the steps, out of breath. "Thanks, Rosa," he panted, fishing for his pass. "You're a lifesaver." Jack hurried through the bustling corridors of St. Mary's Hospital, nodding quick hellos to colleagues as he passed. Just as he reached the staff locker room, a hand touched his shoulder. "Dr. Peterson?" It was Nancy, one of the head nurses. "Mary needs to see you in her office right away." Jack's stomach dropped. "Did I do something wrong?" Nancy shook her head. "No idea, hun, but she said it's urgent." Mary looked up as Jack entered, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Ah, Jack, thanks for coming so quickly. Have a seat." Jack lowered himself into the chair, trying to keep his nervousness at bay. "What's this about, Mary?" Mary leaned forward, her expression serious. "We've got an unusual situation. A very wealthy patient has requested a house call and she's specifically asked for you." Jack's brow furrowed. "Me? But I'm just a resident. Surely one of the attending physicians." Mary held up a hand. "This patient is quite insistent, and given her generous donations to the hospital over the years, we're inclined to accommodate her requests. Are you up for it?" Jack nodded slowly, curiosity overtaking his initial hesitation. "Of course. When do I leave?" Jack sat in the passenger seat of the ambulance, his medical bag clutched tightly in his lap. The driver, a burly man named Mike, glanced over at him. "So, Doc, any idea what we're walking into here?" Mike asked. Jack shook his head. "Your guess is as good as mine. All I know is that she's wealthy and specifically requested me." Mike let out a low whistle. "Must be nice to have that kind of pull. Maybe she'll leave you a nice tip, eh?" Jack chuckled nervously. "I doubt it. Probably just wants a second opinion on something minor." As they turned onto a tree-lined street of massive houses, Mike's eyes widened. "Minor, huh? Take a look at where we're headed, Doc." The ambulance pulled up to a set of ornate iron gates, which swung open as if by magic. They drove up a winding driveway, passing manicured lawns and elaborate fountains. At the end stood a mansion that looked like it belonged in the pages of a luxury real estate magazine. "Holy!" Jack breathed, taking in the sight. Mike parked in front of the grand entrance. "Well, Doc, looks like you've hit the jackpot with this house call. Good luck in there." A butler led Jack through opulent hallways adorned with priceless artwork and antiques. They stopped outside a set of double doors. "Mrs. Thompson is waiting for you, Doctor," the butler said, opening the doors with a flourish. Jack stepped into what appeared to be a bedroom larger than his entire apartment. Sitting up in a four-poster bed was an elderly woman, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite her apparent illness. "Ah, you must be Dr. Peterson," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "I'm Sarah Thompson. Thank you for coming on such short notice." Jack approached the bed, setting his bag down. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thompson. What seems to be the problem?" Sarah waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, just the usual aches and pains of old age. But that's not why I called you here, young man." Jack paused in the middle of taking out his stethoscope. "I'm not sure I understand." Sarah's eyes twinkled with mischief. "How would you like to make a lot of money, Dr. Peterson?" Jack's jaw dropped. "Excuse me?" Sarah leaned forward, her gaze intense. "I have a proposition for you, Dr. Peterson. I need someone to pretend to be my son for 1 month. In return, I'll pay you a sum that will clear all your debts and then some." Jack took a step back, his mind reeling. "Mrs. Thompson, I can't do that. It's unethical, not to mention illegal." Sarah chuckled. "My dear boy, there's nothing illegal about an old woman wanting some company. As for ethics, well, sometimes the ends justify the means, don't you think?" Jack shook his head. "I'm sorry, but I can't." $1 million, Sarah interrupted. "Tax-free." The number hit Jack like a physical blow. He thought of Emily, of the wedding she dreamed of the life they could have without the crushing weight of debt. "Why me?" he managed to ask. Sarah's expression softened. "Because you remind me of my late son, and because I can see in your eyes that you're a good man who's struggling. Let me help you, Jack." Jack stood frozen, torn between his ethics and the temptation of financial freedom. Jack unlocked the door to his apartment, his mind still spinning from Sarah's offer. As he stepped inside, he immediately noticed something was off. The place felt emptier. "Em?" he called out. No response. He walked into the bedroom and froze. Emily's closet was open and empty. Her makeup was gone from the dresser. On the bed was a note. With shaking hands, Jack picked it up and read, "Jack, I can't do this anymore. I love you, but I can't marry someone who doesn't share my dreams. I'm staying with my sister. You have 1 month to figure out if you want this wedding as much as I do. Emily." As if on cue, his phone rang. It was Emily. "Em, please," Jack said as soon as he answered. "Let's talk about this." Emily's voice was cold on the other end. "There's nothing to talk about, Jack. You have 1 month. Either you find a way to give me the wedding we both deserve or we're done." The line went dead. Jack sank onto the bed. The note crumpled in his fist. Slowly, he pulled out the business card Sarah had given him. He stared at it for a long moment before picking up his phone and dialing. "Mrs. Thompson, it's Dr. Peterson. I'll do it." Over the next few weeks, Jack's life transformed dramatically. He moved into Sarah's mansion, trading his scrubs for tailored suits and his cramped apartment for a luxurious suite. At first, it felt like an elaborate game of make-believe. Sarah introduced him to her high society friends as her son, spinning tales of his heroic work as a doctor in far-flung corners of the world. Jack found himself attending galas, polo matches, and charity auctions. He learned to navigate the world of the ultra-wealthy, all while continuing his regular shifts at the hospital. To his surprise, he began to enjoy Sarah's company. She was witty, sharp, and full of fascinating stories. In quiet moments, she would show him old photo albums, teaching him about the family history he was supposed to know. One sunny afternoon, Jack pushed Sarah's wheelchair along a winding path in the park. The sun was warm on their faces, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. "You know, Jack," Sarah said, breaking a comfortable silence, "I never told you why I really asked you to do this." Jack slowed their pace. "I assumed it was loneliness." Sarah nodded. Partly, but mostly it was because I wanted to give my fortune to someone who deserved it. Someone kind. Someone who would use it to make the world a little better. Jack stopped the wheelchair, moving to face Sarah. What are you saying? Sarah reached out and patted his hand. I'm saying that you've passed the test with flying colors, my dear. Whether you take the money or not, you've shown me that you're a good man. You remind me so much of my Thomas. Jack knelt beside the wheelchair. Tell me about him. As Sarah began to speak, her eyes misting with memories, Jack listened intently, realizing that for the first time, he was seeing her not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a mother who had loved and lost. Late one night, Jack snuck back to his apartment to water his plants. As he was about to leave, his phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Can we talk? I miss you. His heart raced as he dialed her number. Jack? Emily's voice was soft, vulnerable. Hey, Em, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. How are you? There was a pause. I'm okay. Listen, I've been thinking. Maybe I overreacted about the wedding. I know you're doing your best. Jack closed his eyes, guilt washing over him. No, let me finish, she interrupted. I love you, Jack, and at the end of the day, that's what matters. Not the venue or the guest list, just us. Tears pricked at Jack's eyes. I love you too, Em, more than anything. So, Emily said, a smile evident in her voice. What do you say we just go down to City Hall next week and make it official? Jack's heart felt like it might burst. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Jack stood in Sarah's study, his hands clasped behind his back. Sarah sat behind her massive oak desk, looking at him with a mixture of pride and sadness. You're leaving, aren't you? She asked, though it wasn't really a question. Jack nodded. I'm sorry, Sarah. I can't keep lying to Emily. She deserves better than that. We're getting married next week. To his surprise, Sarah smiled. Good. I'm glad you made the right choice. I can't take your money, Jack said firmly. It wouldn't be right. Sarah stood up and walked around the desk. Jack, my dear boy, the money was never a payment. It was always a gift. A wedding present, if you will. Jack's eyes widened. But, Sarah held up a hand. No buts. You've given an old woman a month of joy and companionship. Let me give you and Emily the start you deserve. Tears welled up in Jack's eyes as he hugged Sarah tightly. Thank you, he whispered, for everything. Jack stood nervously in a simple suit, waiting at the end of a short aisle. The room was empty save for the officiant and a couple of witnesses provided by the court. The doors opened and Emily walked in. She wore a simple white dress, her hair adorned with a small flower. To Jack, she had never looked more beautiful. As she reached him, he took her hands in his. You look amazing, he whispered. Emily smiled, her eyes shining. So do you. The officiant began the ceremony, but Jack barely heard the words. He was lost in Emily's eyes, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. I do, he said when the time came, his voice filled with certainty. I do, Emily echoed, squeezing his hands. As they kissed, sealing their vows, Jack felt a sense of peace wash over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Hand in hand, Jack and Emily stepped out into the sunlight, officially husband and wife. They paused on the steps, grinning at each other. So, Mrs. Peterson, Jack said, ready for our glamorous wedding reception at the diner down the street? Emily laughed, but before she could respond, a voice called out, I think we can do a bit better than that. They turned to see Sarah approaching, pushed in her wheelchair by Emily's sister. Behind them, a line of sleek black cars was parked at the curb. As Jack and Emily watched in amazement, caterers began unloading tables, chairs, and what looked like enough food to feed an army. What is all this? Jack stammered. Sarah's eyes twinkled. Did you really think I'd let my favorite doctor have a wedding without a proper celebration? As the impromptu reception took shape around them, Emily pulled Jack aside. Jack, she said, her voice a mix of awe and confusion, how do you know Sarah Thompson? Jack's mind raced. It's a long story. How do you know her? Emily bit her lip. She contacted me a month ago. Said she was a patient of yours and wanted to do something nice for us. I thought she was exaggerating about how much she wanted to help, but she gestured at the elaborate setup. Jack's jaw dropped as the pieces fell into place. You mean, this whole time? Emily nodded, a mischievous glint in her eye. We may have conspired a little. Are you mad? Jack looked from Emily to Sarah, who winked at him from across the makeshift reception area. He burst out laughing, pulling Emily close. Mad? I've never been happier in my life. As guests began to arrive, friends and family who had been secretly notified, Jack made his way over to Sarah. You planned all this? He asked, shaking his head in disbelief. Sarah smiled up at him. Consider it my final test, and you passed with flying colors, my boy. Jack knelt down and hugged her tightly. Thank you, he whispered. Not just for this, but for everything, for showing me what really matters. Sarah patted his back. You showed me too, Jack. Now go, enjoy your wedding, and remember, you always have a mother in me. As Jack rejoined Emily on the dance floor, he looked around at the joy surrounding them. He had entered this arrangement looking for financial freedom, but he had found something far more valuable, a renewed appreciation for love, family, and the things that truly matter in life.